Well, hello, free people of the Rocky Mountain region, and welcome to this Free State Colorado interview. Today, I'm joined by Isaac Chase, a founder and instructor at Guns for Everyone, where Isaac has provided free firearms training to thousands of Coloradans. Well, Isaac, I hope you are well, and thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to this.
Well, on July 1st, 2025, Colorado's new concealed carry permit and training law went into effect, creating new barriers, costs, and requirements for law-abiding Coloradans to legally carry a concealed handgun. So, Isaac, let's start at the basics. What are the new requirements under this law?
So I'll start by kind of mentioning what the old requirements were, just to kind of give the what it used to be to where it is now. The old requirements were that the entire class could not be online, that the class must be taught by a certified instructor. And the definition of a certified instructor was an instructor who's been certified by a national nonprofit organization that offers training and education in firearms. The default for most of that was the NRA instructor program. But if you had a different national nonprofit that certified instructors, you could use that too. Um, the class must be a handgun class, and it must have been completed within the last 10 years. So that gave instructors really the most amount of latitude to teach in the way that they thought was most appropriate for instructing students on carrying and using a handgun in public. Um, the new requirements, the class must be 8 hours long. The class must be taught by a verified instructor. And the new definition of a verified instructor has a whole bunch of requirements, including that you have to be a concealed carry permit holder in the state of Colorado in order to teach a concealed carry class in Colorado. You must be verified by the sheriff's department in the county where the principal amount of training takes place. So I mentioned that because that's a sticking point for some of the sheriffs lately. No part of the class can be conducted online. And the class must cover specific topics. I'm not going to list them all, but instruction in handling a firearm safely, safe storage of a firearm, the laws around deadly force, et cetera, et cetera. And there's also a list of specific topics that must be covered in the class, including de-escalation, which I'll want to talk about a little bit later. Um, and the class is only, or the certificate that you get is only valid for 1 year from the date of completion. And the class has two tests now. It has a shooting test and a written test. And you must score 70% or higher on the shooting test and 80% or higher on the written test. The shooting test and the written test are at the discretion of the instructor. So that means any instructor gets to write their own test and conduct their own shooting test. So,
Wow. I mean, that's definitely a lot of requirements, a big change from how it's been for a long time here in Colorado. And of course, the first thing I think of is just, how cost prohibitive this is going to be for a lot of people. I work a day job, 8.5 hours every day. I know a lot of people out there who want to be able to legally defend themselves aren't going to be able to, easily necessarily get 8 hours of instruction, have all this time, all this cost, all of this associated with it. It seems like it's going to be a lot of challenges for somebody who's just, a regular working class Coloradan who wants to be able to protect themselves. I mean, what do you think?
yeah, the only success we had in challenging this law was to get the legislature to agree that the entire 8 hours did not need to be completed at the same time. So what we're seeing a lot of instructors do is break this out into two sections or offer a version where you do, 4 hours in the classroom and 4 hours on the range. And part of that, I think, is because of cost. Renting a range for 8 hours is much more expensive than renting one for 4 hours. It is time. The instructor's time is worth money. It's also uh, there's less instructors who can offer this because of the instructor verification situation. There's just less instructors than there were before. So it reduces the size of the supply on the market. And because of the new requirements and a lot of misunderstanding, has drastically increased the demand all of a sudden. And so all of our classes that we conduct have been full since about February or March. And we have people constantly contacting us, all your classes are full. What can I do? And it's like, well, wait for us to post more classes because we're at maximum capacity right now.
Wow. Wow. So yeah, there was definitely a rush, it seems, kind of leading up to July 1st for people to take the classes, try and get their permits, get everything through their local county there
Hmm.
before this went into effect. I mean, that must have been pretty crazy.
On top of that, these counties, most of them are appointment based for you to get your permit, and they didn't increase any of their capacity for processing, and you had all these people rushing to get in. So just to give you an idea, El Paso County, which is the busiest county in the state for concealed carry permits, is booking appointments out past the first of the year now.
Wow.
So more than 6 months just to get an appointment. And then, the amount of time you'll have to wait for them to process that, which El Paso County, since COVID, has been at the full 90 days. So if you're in El Paso County right now, you're looking at least 9 months from start to finish for you to be able to get your concealed carry permit.
Wow. Wow. I was reading through the law before the interview here, and I did notice some of the requirements that you mentioned some of them about what's going to be on the test for people out there, this competency exam where people need to get this 80% score. And, I couldn't help but notice, of course, one of the things that stuck out was this red flag gun confiscation, the extreme risk protection orders being listed in there, and safe storage laws, and all the gun laws that the legislature has just crammed down our throats these last few years. And of course, they want to make sure that everybody's fully aware of those, but it's just like, almost not necessarily indoctrination, but just really just hammering at this idea of how many restrictions there are on the people of Colorado who want to do the right thing, who want to be legal in doing this. I mean, and then you juxtapose that to the people who aren't going to follow the law, the people who are just going to do it anyway, whether they're good or bad people. There's good people out there who just say, I'm going to take my chances. And then there's some obviously nefarious bad people out there who are going to commit crimes and don't care at all about these permitting requirements. And it just seems like they're penalizing the people who just want to do it right. It's crazy.
Well, the majority of gun owners do want to do it right. So if you were going to go after guns and gun owners, you might as well go after the biggest group, and that's going to be the people who are trying to follow the rules and trying to follow the law. As far as indoctrination goes, when we do our test, we rewrote our test in a way that tries as much as possible to reinforce actual learning as opposed to passing a test. So the questions on the test are written in such a way that we make sure we cover all the topics that are required, but they're also written in a way where the student has to consider what kind of answer makes sense and what doesn't. And so we make sure that people understand that where these laws don't make sense, we put that right there in the test. But it is absolutely true that people equate what the law says with what is the responsible use of a firearm. And that is absolutely the wrong way to look at it. The law is important, and we shouldn't ignore the law, but we shouldn't use the law as our model of responsible gun ownership.
Wow, that's a great point there too. And that's interesting about having some discretion as a trainer, as being one of these verified instructors in order to come up with kind of the live shooting portion of it, as well as that competency exam. And then ultimately, it seems to me though, it's really going to be on the sheriffs to ensure that the instructors are kind of at least adhering to the spirit of the law on some level by making sure that these tests are somewhat within the realm of being reasonable
Yeah.
according to them, which really just means that the sheriffs are kind of the ones more in control, which it's been that way. Don't get me wrong, but in terms of on a deeper level now with the actual instruction in the courses.
That's a really good point and question. The law states and has for since 2003 that the sheriffs don't have any discretion to go beyond what the law says. The requirements that are listed in the law, we have to follow, the sheriffs have to follow as well. And what we've encountered since we've been doing our classes since 2012, over 100,000 people come through our classes. We've interacted with almost every county in the state when it comes to issuing permits. And we've had a few squabbles through the years where sheriffs have tried to require more than what the original requirement was. One of the common ones was, we didn't require that you shoot in order to take our concealed carry class. We always offered it as part of the free class if you wanted to do that, but we didn't force people to do that. And and we had reasons for that, which I won't go into now, but we had good reasons for that. Um, a couple of the sheriffs over the years tried to say that you're not going to get a permit unless you took a shooting portion of the class. And so we had to write some angry letters. We had to get some attorneys involved and have them write some angry letters. We ended up suing Larimer County back in 2021 because when we do squabble with the sheriffs, they tend to shut down communication. Once we tell them that they're wrong and that they shouldn't be doing this, a lot of times they'll just stop talking to us. And if they stop talking to us, but they change their requirement, that's good enough. If they just ignore us, but now they're no longer requiring the shooting portion, that's good enough for us. But what's going on with the sheriffs now is that they are asking for things like a syllabus in your for your class in order to become a verified instructor. And that's not in the law. That's not a legal requirement. We don't have to submit a syllabus. So we've pushed back on the sheriffs on this topic, and we have convinced the sheriffs that we have conversed with that this requirement is not lawful. And I will point out one county in particular that actually made a change to their website because some of the counties didn't make a change to their website. They just tacitly like don't require it anymore. But Pueblo County, when I pushed back on this, it took them a couple days. They got back to me. They said, "You're right. This is not a requirement." And they changed their website for the verification process to say, we prefer you to send us a syllabus, but it's not required. The sheriffs, I think, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt to say that their interest is to make sure that the citizen is being as responsible as possible. And where they think their control on that is with the instructors. And so they're trying to make sure that the instructors are doing a good job. We don't agree with standardized testing when it comes to self-defense and understanding firearms and using them safely in public. We don't agree with these rigid requirements because the student is the one that tells us what they need. They don't use their words, but we respond to the needs of the class and the student on what we need to cover in the class. And so there has been a lot of tension even before this law with some of the sheriffs around what does the law say we need to do and us balancing what is responsible instruction of a student in a required class. Because even before these restrictions, it was still a required class. So it's been very complicated, and some of the sheriffs have pushed back more than others. One of the main things that we're running into right now is that some sheriff's departments are requiring that you take a class with a verified instructor within the county that you are applying. And that's not in the law. There is nothing that says you have to take a class from an El Paso County sheriff's or an El Paso County instructor to apply in El Paso County. So lately, I think it's been Weld County and Jefferson County have been requiring this, and it's not lawful.
Wow. That's interesting and also disappointing. I live up here in Weld County and we're often touted and I think a lot of people up here try to make it the more constitutional and pro-freedom, pro-liberty county in Colorado. And of course El Paso, as a relatively conservative type county. So unfortunate to hear that, but that's the reality of it. And I'm glad that you are out there as an advocate and really fighting for the citizens of Colorado to be able to exercise these constitutional rights.
Yeah, it's not just unfortunate, it seems to be the norm that the sheriffs that have the reputation for being pro-freedom tend to be the ones that create the most pushback when it comes to overstepping the line. Justin Smith in Larimer County, he had the same reputation of being pro-freedom, and we had to sue him to get him to comply with the law. Uh, Weld County Sheriff, he's been what's his name?
Steve Reams.
Reams, has a reputation for, well, they don't charge for the permit. That's great. We appreciate that. We think that that is pro freedom, but not creating more restrictions than is required under the law is not pro freedom. And Sheriff Roybal in El Paso County, it's the same thing. I don't know how much of it comes down to the sheriff themselves or the deputy that's in charge of the program, because that is a thing where the undersheriff or a deputy is the one that ends up interpreting the law and then creating policy.
Interesting, interesting. Well, and I can't applaud you, Guns for Everyone, enough because, being an advocate out there, actually not only providing, 100,000 people, getting them trained, free trainings for people to get their concealed carry permit is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, that's doing real important work to ensure that good people in Colorado are able to protect themselves and their families. I mean, that's so important. And then to take it a step further and actually be advocates for the gun owners of Colorado by pushing back on the sheriffs and speaking out. I mean, it's phenomenal, and thank you so much for doing that.
Well, I got to give credit to Edgar for being the driving force behind that. I've learned a lot working with him over the years, and he's inspired me to be the kind of person who will pick up a phone and say, call the sheriff and say, "Hey, we need to talk," because that's an intimidating thing to do. Um, and we have found that a lot of instructors are afraid that they're going to end up on like some kind of a blacklist for pushing back against the sheriff's department or saying something like, well, yeah, I understand it's against, it's not the law, but it's just easier to do it this way. And our attitude is like, yeah, it might be easier right now to do it this way, but when you have 64 counties across the state and 64 sheriff administrations across the state, it is not easier to just acquiesce to each one of their restrictions and requirements. So, we're actually just trying to make it easier for ourselves by stepping up and saying something to the sheriffs or taking it further when we need to.
Well, and that's such a great point too, Isaac. Just this idea that people have, I think, because I come across it all the time, even like city council meetings or school board meetings. People, especially like good, well-intentioned people, don't want to upset the apple cart. They don't want to stand up too much and push back against authority, generally speaking, because they want to be respectful and they want to kind of be within the bounds. But sometimes that acts as a handicap towards people standing up for their rights or speaking out. And I think nowadays, hopefully, especially with social media and seeing the examples of other people who are taking up that role of being somebody who's going to speak out and stand up for their rights and the Constitution and stand up for their community. Hopefully, more people are going to get that courage as they see other people do it to push back and say, "Hey, listen, I know you're the sheriff, you're a top law enforcement officer in the county. You got a lot of power, and my life could be bad if you're totally against me all the time. But at the same time, I got to speak up. You're still a public servant. You still work for the people. You're still an elected representative of the people. You're still serving at the behest of the people, and you have a constitutional duty to obey the law and follow it as it's supposed to, and not necessarily be this authoritarian, of course. So that's encouraging for sure.
What we'd really, really like to see, although I have no hope that this is going to happen, is that these pro-freedom sheriffs, I'll put quotations around that because what it means whatever you want it to mean, um, would tell the legislature that they're not going to do any of this and that they're going to continue to issue permits under the old law. That kind of civil disobedience coming from the sheriff's department means a lot more than it does coming from some random person who decides that they're not going to get a permit because they don't agree, which I understand, and I applaud that attitude. Um, if the risk and benefit is there for you to say I could take a misdemeanor charge if I had to because I don't agree with these laws, I respect that. But one person doing that in one county is a lot different than two or three sheriffs in the biggest counties saying we're not going to do it. This is ridiculous. And they had reason to do that to the legislature because the legislature wrote a confusing law. The law is difficult to implement, and the law did not really give the sheriff's departments enough time to implement it or budget increases to implement it. And so I would respect these sheriffs a lot more if they just told the legislature that they're not going to do what these laws require. And they're going to go back to enforcing, I don't agree with permits in the first place, but I did think across the country for a state that had a permit requirement, this was the most reasonable version of a permit that you could get across in the entire country. And again, I don't expect it to happen, but that's what would really make a difference in the state. For now, the citizens need to step up, and I think the reason the gun laws are the way they are in this state is because gun owners are not doing their job. Gun owners are not stepping up and contacting their representatives, donating to the causes, showing up to the legislative committee meetings. We have 600,000. I'm sorry. Yeah, we have roughly, what's the number? Um, Roughly 600,000 permits, active permits in the state. And we couldn't even get 600 people to show up at the legislative committee to provide testimony. That's gun owners failing, you know. And they're like, well, this is what we commonly hear from gun owners. I shouldn't have to. Well, if George Washington said I shouldn't have to, we wouldn't be here. I mean,
No,
your
that's
rights need to be defended continuously.
100% well said, sir. Couldn't agree with you more. I think that's so important. And I was thinking too that this is really going to be another election issue for sheriffs, for candidates for sheriffs across county in counties across Colorado. This is something that gun owners, voters, people who believe in liberty and constitutional values should really be questioning the candidates who are running for these sheriff's offices and say, hey, listen, are you going to do everything possible to make it as easy for law-abiding citizens to get their permits, reducing costs, eliminating costs, reducing requirements, whatever they can do within those bounds I'd love it, of course, to see them totally opt out. That'd be absolutely incredible. But even if they made an effort to say, hey, listen, we're going to do everything we can to make this process as easy and as streamlined and as, um, you know, accessible to people, I think that'd go a long way. And that's something people need to be aware of as we get into the election season, where in 2026, there's going to be a lot of new sheriffs across Colorado.
Yeah, yeah. And some of them ran on the pro freedom platform, but to them, pro freedom means don't enforce the law any more than I have to, or don't create more laws than what already are there. But we, as a issue voting group, need to get to the sheriff and let them know what the actual problems are and not just rally behind them and say, "Oh, you're pro freedom, I'm going to vote for you," but say, "Hey, if you want my vote and my support, you need to know that this is an issue going on in the state and in your county." And it takes effort. It takes a lot of effort to do that for gun owners. And if you don't want to do that, that's fine, but I don't have any time for you to complain if you're not gonna take the effort to communicate that and support the things that you really care about.
Gotcha. So, Isaac, in terms of, the sheriff having to verify instructors, so, you're in El Paso County. Is it really just the El Paso County sheriff that has to verify you as an instructor? And then basically I know there's still that ambiguity and there's still that fight there, but then, theoretically, then you could teach anybody across the state of Colorado, and they can go in their own county and apply because you've been verified by one sheriff in your own county. Would that be accurate?
That's what the law says. That's what most of the counties are abiding by. Some of them that didn't abide by that only took a little bit of pushback to change their position on it. So, like I said, right now we're dealing with Weld County and with Jefferson County, and I, I, I heard, but I haven't verified that Denver County was having this issue. But Denver County's always been more of a you know, let's get things moving kind of county and hasn't put extra onus on people over the years besides charging, the full amount and requiring what's in the law. Denver County has been generally a pretty efficient county in processing permits. Arapahoe County has been pretty efficient with processing permits. And so, yes, the answer is yes, but we are encountering some pushback from some of the sheriffs right now. We expect that will resolve as we move through communicating with them, but that takes time. So
Yeah, and I think communicating with them and then the social media exposure, like you said, a lot of these people ran on that pro freedom message. They're all elected. They can all be replaced. And I think getting it out there and really getting the gun community and people who believe in liberty and freedom really active on social media and everywhere, and really challenging these sheriffs who are not making it easy for people who are following the law, who are doing everything right, and making it harder for them to get their permits. That definitely needs to be exposed, and I think there's some good opportunity there for individuals across Colorado to kind of have some accountability.
yeah, and when you contact your legislature or your representatives, sometimes you're like, well, I don't know if they're really listening to me, or if they're even hearing this. But your sheriff is going to hear from you if you contact them. If you email the sheriff's department, if you call the sheriff's department and you let them know, point to what the law says and say you gotta get in line with this law. You're getting a bigger return on your time and effort when you do that with the sheriff's department. So the power is in the hands of the people if they would just use it. So that's what I'm hoping for.
Well said, for sure. And, Guns for Everyone, Isaac, you and Edgar have been doing a phenomenal job of providing free concealed carry courses for so many years now. But how is this going to change with these new requirements? I mean, there's so much more costs involved and time involved. How are you going to be able to, what's going to change for you guys?
So when we first encountered this law, we were looking at how we do the classes and how we stay open and stay afloat. And we decided that we were just going to give it our best effort to see if we could keep it going with the current, with the new requirements and the increased burden. So far, it's working. I'll say it's working, although it's not working as well as it was in Colorado Springs. I used to have a classroom, and I would conduct classes whenever I wanted to. That fell apart because of this new requirement, and so I've been relying more on people who provide space here down in Colorado Springs. Edgar's been able to keep his classroom open barely, and we're going to keep going as long as we can. And if we can't, we'll figure out some other way to provide value to the public for free. Our mission with the free classes is you shouldn't have to pay for your right. So the cost of the class is a barrier. If we can remove that barrier for you, we will. We also do it because some people just really can't afford to do it. Like you said at the beginning, it's costly and time consuming, and so we do it for the people who can't afford it. But it does cost money, and it is this the bills do pile up for running classes. Just ordering targets, I was like, man, I hope I have enough in the account to pay for fresh targets for the upcoming classes I have scheduled. And so we do rely not only on donations from people in the classrooms, but also we encourage people who, care about the work we've done to donate further if they can and when they can. So we're very stubborn when it comes to the free classes, and we will make sacrifices to keep it going. But I would say right now we're still in the experimental phase to see if this is going to continue to work.
Oh, that's incredible. Incredible. I mean, thank you so much for providing that service to the community. Definitely encourage people to support Guns for Everyone, to contribute, because this is an important thing, especially now more than ever with these increased costs and making it a little bit more difficult for people. But Isaac, what else do people need to know about the new concealed carry law or anything else that you'd like to bring up?
So I didn't mention the refresher training. Prior to the law change, in order to renew a permit, you did not need to provide any training, any new training certificate. Uh, the way the law was written, once you had a permit and it remained active, there was no longer a continuing training requirement. Uh, Now there is. The new training requirement for renewals is everything that's in the original uh, new applicant class, but the class only needs to be 2 hours long rather than 8 hours. There's no way you're going to be able to cover all these requirements in 2 hours. So we're doing refresher classes, but we're doing them within the structure that we currently have. So, and I think a lot of other instructors are following that same idea. The renewal certificate or the refresher certificate, it's only valid for 6 months rather than for a whole year. So if you are getting ready to renew your permit, you do need to time that correctly, so that your certificate does not expire before your permit expires. The permit requirements are that you can start the renewal process 120 days before your permit expires. So that's just some information for people who are watching who already have their permit and need to know that. There is another way to qualify for your permit, and it didn't change with the law. And that is if you can show that you're a participant in shooting competitions. The way that we understand the law is it needs to be a sanctioned competition, something like an IDPA course or a USPCA course. But we're also starting to offer once a month a concealed handgun focused competition. And it is a sanctioned competition under the national nonprofit that we have, Guns for Everyone National. And if you show up to that, it does cost money to participate. It's not free, but it is a much quicker way to meet the new requirements. And kind of the reason why we're doing it is kind of as a middle finger to the legislature to say, we're going to continue to move people through this process as efficiently as we can. And that includes taking advantage of the entire law and not just paying attention to one section of it. So if you're looking to renew or get a new permit, I would encourage you to go read the law, and that would be 1812 202.5, the concealed handgun training class, refresher class rules, and familiarize yourself with that. And also, talk to us or to other instructors who are working through this process to understand what they need. One of the problems with a new and complex law is that most people really aren't all on the same page when it comes to that, from the sheriff down to the student and everybody in between, even the legislature. Um, Wanted to point out one more thing about this law that is a problem, and that is the law requires that the sheriff's departments do not create any kind of public database of concealed carry permit holders. If you're an instructor, you have to have a permit. And law requires that the sheriff's departments publish a list of verified instructors. So that creates a de facto list of a subset of concealed carry permit holders. So, in effect, the new law requires the sheriff's departments to break an existing law um, to follow this verified instructor program. So we do have we're lining up a lawsuit in the state to sue the state to try to get the law overturned, and this is one of the elements that we're focusing on. The other element that we're focusing on is how the restrictions do not align with the Bruin decision, and so we're working on that lawsuit. A lot of the legal fund that we've been working with has been to go after the sheriffs and get them to comply. But as soon as we get all the front range sheriffs on the same page, we're going to start pursuing that statewide litigation.
Awesome. Wow. That's incredible. I love it. I love the shooting sports competition aspect to it. I'd love to see a rebirth. Maybe, there could be some lemonade out of these lemons, where we have more shooting competitions across Colorado. It does double duty. Not only can you be, renowned, maybe earn some prize money, but then also, qualify for your concealed carry permit. And I'd love to see that kind of culture grow here in Colorado of shooting sports. I think there's incredible opportunity there with more young people than ever getting into firearms, and that would be really cool. So yeah, it's a great avenue forward. I'd love to see that grow. And yeah, that middle finger to the legislature and say now all of a sudden we have more young people out there participating in shooting sports thanks to this law. That could kind of be some great justice there.
Yeah, yeah. The way we train, we encourage people not to use competition as training. On the other hand, we do encourage people to exercise their rights, and so that's why we're kind of striking this balance of offering this competition, but making it clear that we don't consider it training. We just consider it qualification under this nonsense law. Um, the the class itself, forcing all this other stuff into the class really gets in the way of the learning process for the student in the responsible use of a firearm for self-defense. And so that's something that we make sure we tell the students in the class that there are elements of the class that are going to interfere with your proper learning of these concepts and principles and skills. We acknowledge it, we work around it, but we make sure that they understand that.
Awesome. Well, perfect, sir. Really appreciate your time. Any final thoughts here?
No, I really appreciate you having me on. I've been enjoying watching your podcast and podcast or show or whatever you want to call it. Uh, Doing it on video kind of makes it not necessarily a podcast, but that's that's semantics. I really like the guests you have on, and it's helping me stay on top of other things going on in the state that I don't normally pay attention to. So,
Awesome. Well, very kind words for you, sir. I appreciate it. And you're definitely out there fighting the fight, boots on the ground, tip of the spear, standing up for people's rights and ensuring that good law-abiding Coloradans are able to defend themselves and their families. I mean, it's a high calling, and I just can't appreciate you, your efforts, Edgar's efforts, and keep up the great work. And people, if you have an extra couple bucks, throw it Isaac's way. Let's get him going and push back against this authoritarians in our legislature who do not want us to be armed at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Take care, sir. Please keep me up to date if there's any other news or any updates with the lawsuits or anything like that.
All right, will do.
Awesome. Take care.
Thanks.